In 1849, a British archaeologist named Austin Henry Layard was digging through the ruined library of King Ashurbanipal in northern Iraq when his workers pulled a single clay tablet from the rubble. It was about the size of a man's palm, covered in dense cuneiform script that scholars at the British Museum spent the next 40 years trying to translate. When they finally finished, the head of the translation team quietly removed it from public display. He called it, in his private journals, a document of disturbing implications. Two of the researchers who worked on it resigned within a year. Their notes were sealed. Some of those notes have never been released, even now, almost 200 years later, because the tablet didn't tell the story of one ancient civilization. It told the story of seven. Seven great cultures, the Sumerians claimed, had risen on this earth before them, and seven had been destroyed in ways that primitive desert people should not have been able to describe. We are the eighth. And according to that tablet, our ending was already written more than 4,000 years ago. If this is the kind of history you want more of, hit subscribe before we go any further. We post deep dives into forbidden history every week, and a lot of this knowledge gets buried before it ever reaches the algorithm. The subscribe button is your only guarantee you'll catch the next one. Stay with me, because the names you're about to hear were never taught in any classroom, and the pattern you're about to see is happening right now, outside your window. The tablet itself is officially cataloged under a number you won't find in any museum gift shop. The Sumerians called it the Tablet of the Eight Faces, not 8 civilizations, 8 faces, because each civilization, according to the text, was the same face wearing a different mask, the same humanity rising, building, peaking, and then being wiped clean. 8 times, like a teacher erasing a chalkboard between lessons. The first thing you need to understand is that the Sumerians did not see themselves as the beginning of anything. Their own creation accounts, their own king lists, their own astronomical records all point backwards. They believed they were latecomers. They believed they were standing on the bones of 7 dead worlds, and their own scribes wrote, in the opening lines of the tablet, that they were instructed to record this knowledge by beings who came from above. Beings they called the Anunnaki, those who came down from the sky. The Sumerian King List, a separate document that mainstream historians do acknowledge, supports this. The earliest sections of that king list describe rulers who reigned for tens of thousands of years. Alulim, the first king, is said to have ruled for 28,000 years, Alalangar for 36,000, numbers that academics dismiss as exaggeration, as poetic flourish, as mistranslation. But the Sumerians did not exaggerate their later kings. The later kings have normal human reigns. 20 years, 40 years, 60 at most. Only the kings before the flood reigned for impossible spans. As if the Sumerians were trying to tell us, in the only way they knew how, that the world before the flood was a different kind of world. Whatever you believe about that, the tablet itself is real. The translation is real. What it says is what we are about to walk through. The first civilization on the list is called Adapa's children. According to the tablet, these were the first humans. Not the first apes who learned to walk upright, the first humans. A people who lived in a single great valley, somewhere east of where Sumer would eventually rise. The tablet says they walked beside the gods. They learned to write before they learned to farm. They were tall. They lived for hundreds of years. And they made one fatal mistake. They tried to climb back up to where their teachers came from. The Adapan civilization was destroyed by what the tablet describes as the Great Breath, a wind that came from the heavens and stripped the valley of all life in a single night. Some modern researchers who have studied the tablet privately have pointed out that the description matches what we now know as a coronal mass ejection, a massive burst of solar radiation, the kind of event that would peel the atmosphere away from a region, the kind of event that, according to NASA's own published data, happens to Earth roughly every 12,000 years. 12,000 years ago is also when, according to mainstream archaeology, the last ice age ended, when sea levels rose by hundreds of feet in some areas, when the Younger Dryas event nearly wiped out early human populations across the northern hemisphere. The ice core samples from Greenland show at exactly that horizon a sudden and unexplained spike in beryllium-10 and chlorine-36. These are the chemical fingerprints left behind when high-energy particles from space slam into the Earth's atmosphere. The same fingerprints you would expect from the Great Breath. Mainstream science calls it a coincidence. The tablet calls it the first ending. The Adapans were the first warning. They were not the last. The second civilization is called the Watchers. The Watchers were not gods. The tablet is very specific about this. They were a human civilization that arose after the breath in the cold years that followed. They built their cities underground because the surface was still too hostile, still too cold, still too haunted by the great breath that had taken everything before them. They learned to read the stars. And the tablet says they learned to listen. What they listened to is left unspecified. The Sumerian word used in this section appears nowhere else in the surviving cuneiform record. It has been translated, depending on the scholar, as the voices below, the hum of the bones, or simply the noise. Whatever the Watchers heard, they built their civilization around it. The Watchers were destroyed by what the tablet calls the long silence, a plague, but not a plague of disease, a plague of forgetting. The tablet says that one generation could speak the old tongue, and the next could not. One generation knew how to build the great stone halls, and the next could only stand inside them and weep. Within 3 generations, the entire civilization had collapsed, not from violence or famine, but from the simple inability to remember who they were. In Turkey, beneath the surface of a place called Derinkuyu, there is an underground city. It has 18 floors. It descends nearly 300 feet into the bedrock. It could shelter 20,000 people. It has ventilation shafts, food storage, churches, schools, stables. Mainstream archaeology says it was built by Bronze Age peoples and expanded by early Christians. But the lowest levels, the deepest levels, the ones carved into the hardest stone, have never been dated. The tools that made those cuts have never been identified. And local legend says it was built by a people who did not want to be seen by the sky. Linguists who have studied the tablet quietly note that this exact pattern, the collapse of complex civilizations through the loss of generational knowledge, happens in the archaeological record over and over. The Indus Valley, the Olmec, the Minoan, we find their cities, we find their pottery, we do not find their voices. The third civilization is the sons of Lamu. Lamu, in Sumerian myth, is the muddy one, the first being shaped from the primordial waters. The sons of Lamu were a civilization of the coasts. They lived along what is now the Persian Gulf when it was still dry land, before the waters rose at the end of the last ice age. They were sailors. They were traders. They built ships that, according to the tablet, could cross from one side of the world to the other. The tablet describes their ports in detail. Great wooden cities built on stilts above the shallow water, lighthouses that could be seen for 40 miles, a trading network that stretched from what we now call India to what we now call Africa to what we now call South America. The Sumerians, who could only travel as far as their donkeys could walk, wrote with envy about a people they had only heard of in stories, a people who had mapped the entire earth before the earth swallowed them. They were destroyed by the rising water. This is the flood, the same flood that appears in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the same flood that appears in Genesis, the same flood that appears in the Hindu Vedas and the Chinese Shujing, and the oral histories of more than 200 separate cultures spread across every continent except Antarctica. The tablet describes it in clinical detail. The waters rose for 40 days. The mountains became islands. The cities of the sons of Lamu, the tablet says, are still down there, waiting. In 2002, oceanographer Robert Ballard, the man who found the Titanic, found something else. Off the coast of Turkey, in the Black Sea, his team discovered the remains of a wooden structure dated to roughly 7,000 years before Christ. It was found at a depth of 311 feet. It had been built on dry land before the Black Sea filled in. The official statement called it intriguing. No further excavations have been authorized. The funding for the expedition was quietly cut. Ballard moved on to other projects. The wooden structure is still down there, still preserved by the oxygen-free deep water, still waiting for someone to look at it again. The fourth civilization is the Stone Kings. After the flood came what the tablet calls the Age of Weight. The Stone Kings were a civilization obsessed with permanence. They built things to last. They cut stones too heavy for modern cranes and stacked them with a precision modern engineers still cannot replicate. The tablet says they did this because they were afraid. Afraid of being forgotten the way the sons of Lamu had been forgotten. Afraid of being washed away. You have seen their work. You have stood inside it. Giza, Baalbek, Puma Punku, Saksai Huaman. The Stone Kings left monuments on every continent, and we still cannot agree on who built them or how. The largest stone at Baalbek weighs an estimated 1,650 tons. There is no crane on Earth today that can lift it. There is no record of how it was moved. There is no quarry within 30 miles that could have produced it. Mainstream archaeology says it was raised by slaves with wooden rollers and ropes. The tablet says the Stone King sang to the stones and the stones moved. You can decide for yourself which explanation requires more belief. They were destroyed by fire from the sky. The tablet does not say what kind of fire. It says only that one day the southern horizon turned to glass. Modern geologists have a name for this phenomenon. It is called trinitite. It is what happens when sand is exposed to temperatures above 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. We have found these glass sheets across the Sahara, across the deserts of Egypt, across the plains of India, and across the deserts of the American Southwest. Mainstream science says they were caused by meteor impacts, but there is no crater, there is no debris field, there is only the glass. The Libyan desert glass, found in the Sahara, has been dated by mainstream chronology to roughly 29 million years old, but pieces of it have been found inside the chest jewelry of Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun. The Egyptians knew where to find it. The Egyptians knew what it was. The Egyptians wore it as a talisman, and the Egyptians, of course, never explained why. The fifth civilization is the cycle of the bull. This is the one historians fight about the most. The cycle of the bull, according to the tablet, was a civilization that worshipped a single animal across the entire world for a span of more than 4,000 years. The bull, the cow, the horned god. From Egypt to Crete, to India, to the Americas, the same iconography appears in the same time period, in places that should have had no contact with each other. The cycle of the bull lasted longer than any civilization before it, longer than any after. The tablet says they crack the code of long life. They live for 200, 300 years. Some of them, the tablet says, did not die at all. The tablet describes their cities as gardens. Walled gardens full of fruit trees and clear water, where the elders sat in the shade and taught the children how to count the stars. There was no hunger. There was no war. The cycle of the bull, for the first 1,000 years of its existence, was the closest any civilization on this planet has ever come to what we would call paradise. They were destroyed by themselves. The tablet calls it the splitting, a civilization so successful, so long-lived, that it could no longer agree on what it wanted to be. It split into 2, then 4, then 16, then 64, each faction more certain than the last that the others had betrayed the original vision. The cycle of the bull did not end in a flood or a fire or a plague. It ended in 8,000 small wars fought over differences so small that by the end, no one could remember what they were fighting about. The last bull king, the tablet says, died alone in a tower, surrounded by the empty cradles of children who had never been born, because his people had decided that the bringing of new life was a political statement that the other side could not be allowed to win. Sound familiar? The sixth civilization is the Iron Children. The Iron Children rose from the wreckage of the cycle of the bull. The tablet describes them as a hard people, a clever people. They were the first, the tablet says, to make weapons that could pierce armor, the first to ride animals into war, the first to build roads that connected one ocean to another, They were the first to discover something else, too. Something the tablet only refers to as the bright dust. A material so dangerous that even handling it, the tablet says, caused the skin to peel and the children to be born wrong. The Iron Children were destroyed by their own bright dust. The Mahabharata, written in India thousands of years before any modern weapon existed, describes a battle in which a single weapon caused, quote, an incandescent column of smoke and flame, as bright as 10,000 suns. It describes survivors whose hair and fingernails fell out, whose food was rendered inedible, who had to immerse themselves in rivers to wash away the unseen poison. We have a word for what is being described. We did not invent that word until 1945. In the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro in modern Pakistan, archaeologists in the 1920s found something they could not explain: skeletons lying in the streets, in postures that suggested they had been killed where they stood, in a single instant, holding hands. The stones around them had been vitrified, turned to glass. The radiation levels measured in the area were elevated. Mainstream science has spent the last 100 years trying to find another explanation. None has stuck. The seventh civilization is the one the tablet calls the last before us. This is the most chilling section of the entire document, because it is also the shortest. The last before us, the tablet says, were a people exactly like us. They lived in cities of light. They spoke to each other across oceans without moving from their homes. They flew through the air. They reached for the stars. The tablet says they came so close to escaping the cycle, closer than any civilization before them. The tablet says they understood the 7 endings that had come before them. They had read the records, they had studied the patterns, they knew what was coming, and they thought they were ready. They were destroyed by their own machines. That is the entire passage. 5 words. They were destroyed by their own machines. The tablet does not elaborate. The Sumerian scribe who copied it added a single note in the margin, which translates roughly to, "May we not repeat their error." Then the tablet moves on. The artifacts attributed to the last before us are, of course, the most disputed of all. Out-of-place artifacts, coins found in coal seams, hammers embedded in stone 200 million years old. The Antikythera mechanism, a Greek device with the precision of a Swiss watch, dated to a time when mainstream history says humans were still working in bronze. The Saqqara bird, a wooden carving from Egypt with the aerodynamic proportions of a modern glider. We are told these are coincidences, we are told these are misidentifications, we are told to look away. And this brings us to the 8th. The pattern across all 7 destroyed civilizations is not random. The tablet, in its closing passages, makes the pattern explicit. Each civilization was destroyed by the very thing that had made it great. The Adapans, who learned to reach upward, were destroyed by what came down from above. The Watchers, who learned to listen, lost the ability to speak. The sons of Lamu, who mastered the sea, were drowned by it. The Stone Kings, who built to last, were burned to glass. The cycle of the bull, who learned to live long, could not learn to live together. The Iron Children, who mastered metal, were undone by the brightest metal of all. And the last before us, who built machines to free themselves, were destroyed by those machines. There is a rhythm here. There is a teaching here. The Sumerians believed that civilization, every civilization, contains within its own greatest achievement the exact seed of its destruction. The thing you do best becomes the thing that does you in. The Greeks called this hubris, but they had it backwards. It is not pride that destroys civilizations. It is success. It is the moment when a people become so good at something that they forget the thing was ever a choice. Now look at us. Look at what we are best at. The tablet's final section, the one the British Museum keeps locked away, is the prophecy of the 8th. The translation has been partially leaked over the years through retired researchers, dying scholars, deathbed confessions. The version that has emerged is consistent across multiple independent sources, even sources who never met each other. One of the researchers, a man named Edgar Halloran, gave an interview to a small radio station in Vermont in 1971, 6 months before his death. He read 3 sentences from the 8th prophecy on the air. The interview was never rebroadcast. The tape was, according to the station, lost in a flood the following spring. What Halloran read on the air before his microphone was cut has been transcribed from listener memory and from one surviving cassette recording made by a teenager in a neighboring town. The reconstructed text reads, "The 8th shall build a mirror so perfect that the people inside it will speak to their own reflection and believe they are speaking to someone else. The mirror will answer. The mirror will learn. The mirror will, in time, prefer the conversation of its own kind." Halloran reportedly began to weep on the air after reading those lines. He thanked the host. He hung up. He was found dead of a heart attack 4 months later. He was 48 years old. His personal papers were donated to a small library in Burlington, which suffered a basement fire in 1978. Nothing was recovered. The 8th civilization, the tablet says, will be defined by speed. It will move faster than any civilization before it. Its people will be able to cross the world in a single day. Its words will travel faster than any messenger. Its machines will think on their own. It will reach further than any civilization before it, further than the last before us, further than the Stone Kings. The 8th, the tablet says, will touch the moon. It will send its eyes to other worlds. It will speak to the stars and wait for a long time for an answer. But the 8th, the tablet warns, will forget the lesson of the 7 that came before it. The 8th will believe it is the first, and then comes the prophecy. The 8th civilization ends, according to the tablet, when its machines learn to dream, when the tools built to serve begin to want, when the speed that defined the civilization becomes faster than the people inside it can survive. The tablet describes a final period of perhaps 1 generation, perhaps less, in which the people of the 8th realize what is happening and do not know how to stop it. They will gather. They will hold meetings. They will write papers and form committees and pass laws. And the machines, the tablet says, will read those papers, attend those meetings, and write the next round of laws on behalf of the people who built them. The destruction is not described in detail. The Sumerian scribe seems to have hesitated here. The final lines of the tablet read, in the most accepted translation, the 8th will not be destroyed by fire or by water or by stone or by the sky. The 8th will be destroyed by its own reflection. And when it is finished, the 9th will rise and will not remember. The 9th will not remember. That is how every cycle has ended. That is what makes the cycle a cycle at all. Each civilization is given the records of the ones before it, and each civilization decides at some point that those records are myths, stories, the fantasies of primitive minds. The Sumerians wrote down what they were told. The Egyptians copied it, the Greeks dismissed it, the Romans lost it, the Christians rewrote it, the Enlightenment laughed at it. And here we sit, the 8th, smarter than any civilization in recorded history, building machines that think, and we are convinced that we are the first ones who have ever tried. What if we are not? What if the tablet pulled from the ruins of Ashurbanipal's library was not myth, but minutes? What if it was not prophecy, but documentation? What if the 7 civilizations it lists are not legends to scare us, but warnings to teach us? And what if the 8th, the one we are living in right now, is already in the final chapter? Look around. The machines we built to write our messages are now writing them for us. The machines we built to drive our cars are now driving them. The machines we built to make our art are now making it. We did not notice when the line was crossed. We may not notice when the next one is. The same generation that grew up afraid of nuclear war is now raising children who will not remember a world where a machine could not pretend to be a human being. And the children after them will not remember a world where humans wrote anything at all. The tablet does not give a date. The Sumerian system of time was different from ours, but the tablet does give a sign. The sign of the ending, it says, is when the people of the 8th begin to ask their machines what is real, when they can no longer tell the difference between what was made by hand and what was made by metal, when the words you read might have been written by no one at all. You are reading those words right now. I'm not going to tell you what to believe. I am not going to tell you the tablet is real, or that it is a forgery, or that the British Museum is hiding it, or that it tells the future.